Hello Code Gurus, welcome back. And as a part of this video tutorial, we will see how to add input validation using vuelidate plugin to our Vue.js application. So if you have remembered inside our previous web tutorials, so we have been working on how to add custom authentication to our web application. So we have almost added all the flows like sign up, sign in, create login. So if you guys go ahead, we have added login and we have added create account. In the similar fashion, we have added uh, forgot password and confirm sign up pages. So if you have missed that, I'll provide the link to that video tutorial in the description section below. So don't worry about that. Just try to follow that video tutorial before going ahead into this. So all right, so let's proceed with that. So how do we add a vuelidate plugin to our vuelidate validation to our web application? So let's go to a command prompt. So in order to add vuelidate plugin to your web application, all you have to do is just say npm install vuelidate space -- save. So what this guy is going to do is this npm will go ahead and connect to the npm repository and download the vuelidate plugin for us and add it to our web application. So just give it a couple of seconds depending upon your internet speed. All right, so we have successfully added that and looks like we have some security vulnerability over here. Let's go ahead and fix that. So in order to do that, npm has been pretty kind enough to even suggest which command to run in order to fix them. So I'll just go ahead and run them. So it is npm audit fix. So I'll just quickly go ahead and try to run it. So what this guy is going to do is it'll go ahead and scan all the dependencies inside our project, and whichever the package which is having the security vulnerability, it will just go ahead and try to fix that. So just give it a couple of seconds again. Right, so we have successfully fixed that issue. So now let's proceed with our goal for this video tutorial. So now we have successfully added our vuelidate plugin. So by executing npm install vuelidate -- save. So now how do we go ahead? What is the next step? Once you are into your code base, go to your main.js file and try to import your vuelidate over here. So before that, what you need to import and how to import. So in order to learn about that, let's go to vuelidate website directly. So just go to Google and type vuelidate. You will be redirected to this website. So here on the left side, you should see something called as installation section. So this is the first step, is the one which we have done. So the next step which we are going to do is this step over here. So we are just going to import vuelidate and add it to our Vue.js application. So there is an alternate way of adding vuelidate to our components using mixins, but we will see that thing inside our future video tutorials once we discuss the mixin concepts. So for time being, we will just go ahead and stick to our basic usage. So let's go ahead and copy these two lines. So there's no magic. So I'll just go ahead and paste this guy over here and I'll say vue.use and vuelidate. So that's it. So what it does is it goes and enables vuelidate across your entire Vue.js application. So now let's go back to our signup page. So if you remember from our previous video tutorial, this is a vuetify based page. So how do we add this vuelidate plugin to our vuetify? So again, there's no magic. Let's go to the vuetify website and try to find that. So go to Google and just type vuetify.js. You will be redirected to this beautiful website, vuetify.js website. And under that, click on documentation. And under the search, just search for form. So now this has a pretty decent documentation, but again, it's not 100% up to the mark. In few areas, it might be lacking. If you feel that it is lacking, just feel free to contribute to this vuetify project, which is open source. All you can do is just check out that and update your documentation to it and raise a pull request and help the community. So now, in order to find how do we add vuelidate, so here there is a pretty good section called as vuelidate, and they even say why it is what it is. It's a simple, lightweight, model-based validation for your Vue.js. So how do we add that? So what I'll do is I'll just open this project inside your CodePen. So now, how are they going to add it? So the first and foremost, if you see on the left-hand side is your template code, and on the right-hand side is your JavaScript code. So what we will do is let's go back to our form and try to decide what we need to do or what kind of validations we are going to do on our web application. So coming to our username, it's a free flow text. So I want that field to be available. So it's a mandatory field. Same is the case with your email and password, and as well as this checkout button over here. I want my end user to agree that. Then only I'll be processing his sign up request. So now, how do we do this? So we understood that all the 4 fields are required, and coming to the email, it has to do even the extra validation like whether it's a proper email address or not. And coming to the password, we have a couple of requirements from aws-cognito that it should be a minimum of 8 characters, and it should contain a lowercase letter. So we will see all those extra conditions. How do we add that thing to our application? So the first requirement is we should go ahead and ensure that all the fields are required. Now let's go back to this CodePen. So you can see over here, the first thing is you can go ahead and import those validators like this. So we will do exactly the same thing, or if you want to follow the basic example provided by your vuelidate guys, you can even go ahead and do it. So in our case, probably I'll just import just like this because that's how we have been doing in rest of the application. So what I've done is the first step, I've just imported the predefined validators which are available with vuelidate. So the first one is required. Let's just add only that for time being, and we will go back and we will go forth and try to implement or add whatever the additional validations which we require. So what is the next step? So we have imported this guy. So what is the next step? So the next step over here is you have this section called as validations. So let's go ahead and copy that section. So I'll just say copy that, and you should paste that thing inside your export default section. Put a comma over here. Just ensure that you're formatting it. So here we don't need any of these fields for time being because we are not interested in them. So how do I add this? What do we get this from inside this validation section? So here we need to go ahead and define this is the field, and that field is required. So here if you observe, so this is the field name, and what are the validations you are applying on that field name. So in our case, we are just saying it's just a required field. So that's the first step. What is the next step is we need to go ahead and trigger that validation. So how do we do that? So these are the 2 sections which we use to trigger the vuelidate validations. So let's go ahead and try to copy them. So let's go back to our web application inside our form tag. So we will be adding those 2 fields or 2 methods over here. And one thing over here is instead of name, it is going to be your model name. So just go ahead and update that thing to your model name. So that's the first thing. And second thing is like I just want this field to be required. So this is something related to your vuetify, not related to your vuelidate. And I don't need a name section. The label section is fine. I don't need type. By default, it's text. So what else do we need? The next important step is we need to say to vuetify how to display or what error message it has to display. So in order to say that, we have something called as errors-messages, which takes an array of error messages. So we will just go ahead and copy that and put that thing over here into our model section. So the reason why I'm going forth from the vuetify website is it should not feel like as if I'm doing some magic over here. I'm just trying to do apply how, let's say if as a beginner, if I'm trying to do how are we going to do. So I'm not doing any magic. So all I'm trying to do is just go to their website, try to understand how they are doing it, and I'm trying to replicate it over here. So here we have this error messages. So we need this a list of error messages to be passed to it. How are we going to do that? So the one way which vuetify guys have recommended us to do is try to create a method inside a computed section. So till now we don't have that. So let's go ahead and create this computed section. So if you guys remember from your Vue.js basics, it is one of the lifecycle method provided by your Vue.js. So here I've just created the computation section. And if you go back, so what they have done for the name, so they have just created a method and trying to perform a validation kind of thing and trying to return the list of errors. So I'll just copy paste that sample method over here for us. So what we have done over here is, so let's go ahead and say it as like username errors, copy that and go back to your computed section, and this should match exactly the same call which is associated with your error hyphen messages. The next section is we have created the errors section. And one more important thing, this dollar value, sorry, $v is something specific to your vuelidate section. So whenever your vuelidate is trying to evaluate, it is added over here. And this name is going to be a field name. In our case, it is username. And in case if it is dirty, so dirty is the section like if it is one of the lifecycle method provided by your vuelidate plugin. So whenever you say dirty, you're trying to verify whether the fields are valid or not. So here you can see if your field is invalid, it will be true. It will be dirty. So if you see over here, I've gone back to my vuelidate website. So purposefully, I'm trying to create an error over here. If you see, so as soon as it says dirty, dirty means that it has not passed your validations. So that's one of the lifecycle methods. So apart from that, you could see these are the different, I can say it's like properties provided by your vuelidate, which you can use inside your application. So let's go back over here. So if I'm saying if there are any errors, I'm trying to negate that and I'm just trying to return an empty array. So if there are no errors, obviously there's nothing to display. So we are not doing any max length validation to our property. So I'm just going to get rid of it. So again, I'm just going to replace this name with username. And I'm just going to say username is required. So this is the error message which will be shown to the end user whenever if he's trying to proceed without entering a username. So that's it, I believe. So if you go back over here to our vuetify, so what we have done is this is how we try to invoke our vuelidate plugin, and this is the computed method which we have created to display our error messages, the custom error messages, and these are the validation sections which we use to perform on our field. So let's go back to our browser and see our sign up page whether it has successfully added that or not. So the first thing is always try to refresh your page. So let's go ahead and try to refresh the page, because sometimes I found that it's not doing that. But if you see over here, it has successfully added the validation over here. So what we have done is, if the user is trying to proceed to the next field without entering his username, it immediately says, hang on, there is some error over here, and we are saying that username is a required field. Now let's try to go ahead and apply that same logic to the remaining fields. So what we will do is, let's go back to our fields over here. So we don't need a name field and we don't need an ID field over here. We need this both input and output fields. Sorry, input @input and @blur. And this has to be your view model name. So here in our case, it's password. So I'll just say it's password, and what is the next thing which we have done is we need this list of error messages to be added to it. So these are the three sections which we need. So here I'll just say it as like password errors. And let's go back to our validation section. We'll put a comma over here. So we'll say password colon, and we'll say it's a required field. So if you remember, required is coming from your vuelidate plugin. So it has all the logic of trying to verify whether how that field is required. Now under the computed section, we will go ahead and try to populate a custom user error message, which is I can say matches our application. So in order to do that, just copy the name which you have associated with your error messages on the form field. Go back over here, paste that, and create a new method over here. So now I'll just literally copy paste what we have done previously. So instead of username, it's going to be password. So just go ahead and ensure that's the common mistake which most of the users do whenever they are trying to specially copy paste the code from the website. So just ensure that this is matching your model name over here which you have given. So here I've given the error message as password is required. So I'll just save that. That's it, I believe. So we have added this error message, input, output, and we have added validations to it, and we have added passwords. So the next one which is missing from this is your email. We need even your email to be valid. So for doing that, I'll just go ahead and copy these three sections again and paste them and try to format my code. So let's get rid of this name. We don't need name, and by default your email is a text field, so you can even get rid of that. So you need label, you need prepend icon. So here I'll just go ahead and say it as email errors, and this has to match your model name, so it has to be email. So let's copy that and configure validations to against that email. So let's go ahead and say email colon. So here I'll just go ahead and say required. So save that, and again into the computer section, I just need to go ahead and populate the appropriate error messages. So let's go ahead and see whether we are doing it correctly or not for the email. So yes, that's the correct name which we have copied from there. So again, as usual, I'll just copy paste the same method logic over here. It's pretty much the same. So if the password field is not there, then I'll just say it as, if the email is not there, so I'll just say it as email is required. So one more small thing which we missed over here is we forgot to mention that we need a required. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's something related to your vuetify. So it will become true automatically if that field is there. Then if it is not there, it will be false. That's the one which we are using inside our computed section over here. If you go and look at the computed section, we are saying, is that field required? Yes, we need that field. And if it is not there, then I'm pushing an error message to it over here. So I'll just save that and go back to our website and refresh the web page first and click on sign up, and let's go back to our email and see, looks like they are working perfectly fine. But if you observe over here, there is some mistake happening over here. I think it's related to our copy paste. So here again, as I said, it's not your password, it should be your email. So given that we have mentioned, just show that populate that error message for whenever your email is not given. So that's a common mistake again. Just ensure that for every error message you're trying to populate, you are using appropriate model names over here. Now let's go back to our website, refresh it. So let's see if it is working. Yes, perfectly fine. Now I'll purposefully not give my email address. It works perfectly fine. And for your password, it's working perfectly fine. Now, how do we go ahead and do validation for our checkbox? So again, pretty simple. Let's go back to our CodePen over here and see how he is trying to do. So instead of input, there is one small deviation for your checkboxes at the rate change. So blur is still there, required is still there, and error messages are also still there. And in case of proving validations to it, you need to go ahead and do it in a different way. Required is not applicable on that. So how are we going to do that? So we will see that thing now over here. So let's go back to our form. So here, if you see inside our form, we have a checkbox. So here I'll just say it as user agreement. So that's the user agreement. So I'll just get rid of that rules. It's coming from our previous video tutorial, so don't worry about it. So here, this is the model which we have named it. So instead of checkbox, I'll just name it as user agreement, and we will try to go ahead and perform the validation. So how are we going to do that? So over here, the first thing is we need to copy all this configure error messages at the rate change and at the rate blur to this component. So I'll just copy them, go back to our IDE. So here I've just copy pasted the same thing, and the last one is our error messages section. And remember, you still need that required section. So here I'll just say it as user agreement errors. So that's the method name which I'm trying to associate over here. And instead of checkbox, it's going to be user agreement. So whatever your checkbox model name is there, you need to configure that thing over here. So what is the next thing? So they have configured at the rate change. So now in order to say it as like required, so they are trying to evaluate that value and trying to return that value to us. So if you see over here, they have still configured that field. So let that be field over here. So under the validation section, just copy this checkbox and put a comma over here and put a copy paste that, and this has to match your whatever your model name is there. So just copy pasted even that. So what is the next thing? So we have a computed section over here. So under the computed section, you should see something called as checkbox. So here, these are the error messages which are related to your checkbox. So we will go ahead and copy that checkbox errors and paste that thing over here, put a comma section. So I'll just say, so this method name is a bit different. So if you go back to our form, so we have named that error message as user agreement errors. So I'll just go ahead and say user agreement errors. And this is not checkbox. Again, it is user agreement is the model name. Same is the case. Just ensure that's again a most common mistake made by most of the users. So here what I've done is I've just created the empty error message payload over here and just trying to see whether there are any error messages, whether it's true or false, and then I'm saying whether it is checked or not. If it is not checked, then I'm saying you must agree to continue. So that's it, I believe. So what we have done over here is we have associated these three things, and then we have added this thing to our validation. So we just said, just see if it is checked or not. And then finally, we associated a custom error message to it. So let's go back to our web application and try to refresh the page. And let's see whether if the user is not checking that box, it will be shown as we need that field to be validated. All right, so one last step in our validation processes. So we have been doing validations whenever the user is trying to focus or whenever user is trying to avoid or enter his inputs. Now what happens if I try to click on directly on create account? So if you observe over here, it's just proceeding as usual without warning users. So let's go ahead and view that behavior again. So what happens if user tries to submit an empty form? We should stop him from doing that, and we should show appropriate error messages in the field like what fields are required, correct? So how do we do that? So this is a final step inside our form validation. So now in order to do that, first identify which method are you calling whenever we are pressing our create account button. So this is our create account button and we are calling a method called as create account. So let's go ahead and try to find that method. So what you need to do in the first step as a part of this method is you need to go ahead and verify that all the fields are valid or not. So in order to trigger that validation, all you have to say is this dot $v dot $touch. So what this is going to ask vuelidate is, hey, vuelidate, end user has asked me to submit this form to the backend. Can you please verify all the fields are in valid section or not? So now what vuelidate does is it does the validation and sets the dirty field. So now what we are going to do is we are just going to access that field over here. So I'm just going to say this dot $v dot $dirty. So if that field is set to dirty, that means that the validations are failing. If it is not dirty, then validations are passing. So for our initial test, what I'll do is I'll just comment out this previous logic which we have created. And I'll just add some console statement over here. So I'll just say console.log user validations failed. And on the else section, I'll just go ahead and say console.log all good. So now over here, if user has entered all the fields, then we will just display all good. So let's go back to our web page. Looks like we have done some mistake. Go back. Looks like we have done some mistake. Go back. So what have we done? So maybe we have, yeah. So we have commented out extra closing bracket over there. So I'll just go back to our website. So everything is back. So that was just a comment issue. So now if I just click on create account, now what's happening? The user is being forced to perform all the validations. Let's go to our inspect section. Under the console, you should see user validations failed. Earlier, without that adding that touch method to our create account method, it was just directly sending the request back to our backend. And poor our backend has to handle that. So now what has happened is it is failing explicitly. So now let's go ahead and fix our code completely. So what I'll do is we don't need an error section over here because that error section is already being shown to the end user. So what I'll do is I'll just say, or maybe I'll just leave that else section as it is. Maybe in future we can add some kind of analytics. Let's get rid of that. So what I'll do is rather than putting an else block, we don't have an else block condition over here. So I'll just say this dot invert this dot v dot dirty field value. So if it is true, then it will be like false, and it will just not execute our create account over here. So here I'll just copy that entire code and paste that thing inside our if block. So this section has to be executed only if the fields are valid. So here, remember, I'm just saying negate the value of dirty. So if it is true, then it will not send the request to the backend. If it is false, then only it will go ahead and send the request to our backend. So this dot touch is really required because that's where we are trying to ask vuelidate plugin one last time, like, hey, everything is valid or not. So I'll just save that. Let's go back to our sign up page again, and I'll just click on create account. Everything works perfectly fine. So if I just enter something, it just works perfectly fine. Again, this validation is not 100% foolproof. So we need to go ahead and, so if you observe over here, I haven't entered proper email address, even though it is just saying all good. So in our, so how do we go ahead and fix that? So in order to fix that email thing, so we have a predefined validation from vuelidate itself. So here I'll just say it as email is a predefined validation which is available. Just copy that and just put the section over here as email. Now, whenever user enters an invalid email, so here I just want to display a proper error message like it should be a valid email. So just like if you go to the vuetify page over here, under the computer section, for the error messages, they say it's like must be a valid email. So that's how I want to show it to my end user. So I'll just copy the same line, go to my email errors. So it's definitely required. So here what I'm saying is, instead of required, I'm just saying it as email. So this email property is being added to our $v because of this email over here from the vuelidate plugin. So it will just go ahead and evaluate that. If it is true, then it will just do anything. If it is false, user has not entered a proper email address, then we are saying must be a valid email address. So I'll just go back to our web page and see whether we have successfully applied that thing or not. So I'll just go over here. If I just click on that, it just says email is required. So now if I'm just trying to enter some random junk, it will identify that it is not a valid email and wants the end user. All right, that's excellent. Now coming to the password, again, it's pretty much the same, but over here, if you go to aws-cognito, special cats, yeah. So what are the password requirements for your Cognito? So by default, it needs at least an uppercase and lowercase letter. It needs to have a number, and it needs to have a special character. And if you observe, by default, whenever you're trying to create the Cognito user pool, the length is also 8. So how do we ask end user that whether how do I perform minimum length is of 8 or not? So again, for minimum length, there is a predefined validator from your vuelidate. So I'll just go ahead and apply that thing over here. So here I'll just say it as min length, I believe. So let's go back to the vuelidate website. So here I'll just say it as minimum length is the one which we are looking. So just copy that, go back over here, paste that. So now how do I apply that thing on my field? So this is a bit interesting over here. So just saying min length won't be enough. You need to even say min length, and it should be of minimum of 8 characters. So again, since you have specified a different field over here, so okay, this is not for your email, it should be set for your password. So it's a bit confusing, so I'll just rearrange them how it is inside my form. So I've rearranged it. So now what I'm saying is my password field should be of minimum of 8 characters. If it's not, then I need to go ahead and show him the appropriate error messages. So if you go to your vuelidate thing, so how are we trying to identify? We need to go ahead and say the end user that we need at least 8 characters for his password. So how do we do that thing? It's pretty much the same. So here I'll just say negate this dot $v dot password dot. So here we have something called as min length that has come because we have added that thing just now. And what is the error message which we need to say to the end user? So we'll just say password must be minimum 8 characters. Must be minimum of 8 characters. So here we are saying to the end user, now let's go back to the form and check that whether it is there or not. So now if I just go ahead and see user password is definitely required. Now if I try to enter the password, it says password must be of minimum 8 characters. Now what about the other conditions? Unfortunately, for the other conditions, like in order to check whether the password has a minimum of small letter, capital letter, number, or special characters, we do not have any predefined validations available out of the box with vuelidate plugin. So in our next video tutorial, we will see how to create or how to add custom validations to our vuelidate plugin. And as always, if you have liked this video tutorial, please do not forget to like, comment, and share this video tutorial with your friends. And if you have any suggestions or feedback related to our web series, again, please do not forget to provide that thing in our comment section. We have even provided our Facebook page URL over here under the description section. Please do not forget to even like that page if you are available on the Facebook. And you guys can, if you don't want your feedback to be visible to the public, you can send us a private message on our Facebook and we will try to reply you back ASAP. As always, you guys can always subscribe to our channel by clicking a channel icon below over here, and you can view our entire playlist related to this web series over here. Thank you.